Assalamu alaikum dear student. I hope you are all great and well. Student, today I am going to talking about the difference between the dominant alleles and the recessive alleles. In previous lecture we have discussed about the difference between the alleles and the genes, and we also discussed about the phenotype, genotype, homozygous and heterozygous. If any students have confusion, then you can see my previous lecture. I have cleared all the concept of the homozygous, heterozygous, and also as well as the central dogma of the biology. So today my topic is the dominant alleles and the recessive alleles. Dominant alleles are those alleles which have capacity to express its traits, its characteristics in phenotype, while the recessive alleles are those alleles which cannot express their trait. What does it means? It means those alleles which have capacity and tendency as well as a power to express its characteristic in the phenotype by the synthesis of the protein is called the dominant alleles, while the recessive alleles which cannot express their trait. What is the behind the reasons why recessive alleles cannot express their traits? Let's see the diagram. This is a chromosome. You can see here, this is the chromosome. The chromosome consists of the alleles and the genes. The part of chromosomes where the alleles and genes are present called the locus. You can see here, this is the one allele and this is the another allele, right? These alleles these alleles is called a dominant alleles. You know why? Because it have capacity to express, it have capacity to suppress the characteristic of other alleles. That's why this is called a dominant allele, right? While the another allele which cannot express its traits, this is the alleles, but it cannot express its traits due to much capacity in the dominant allele. That's why this allele cannot express its characteristic and trait in the phenotypically. That's why this allele is called a recessive allele. You can see here what is the size behind the recessive allele and a dominant allele. If I show the practical application of these recessive and dominant allele, then you can see here what is the reason behind that. This is the genes. This genes is an active gene. The active gene means it can easily express itself by the formation of the protein. These proteins make show the physical characteristic of the organism. These genes express into the proteins, and the proteins are show the phenotypically. Phenotypically means if you have confusion about the phenotypic and genotypic, then you have to be listen my lectures which have been loaded in previous lecture. So this is the dominant allele. Why this is called a dominant allele? Because it can easily express its trait. It have capacity. It can suppress the other characteristic. It codes and genes are active. That's why it can be expressed in proteins, and this protein show the phenotypically. Phenotypically means the morphological characteristic and physical characteristic of an organism is called a phenotype. You can just phenotype or phenotypic. And the another allele which cannot express its trait, this allele is known as the recessive allele. You can see here this allele is an inactive allele. Inactive allele means it cannot express itself. It cannot express itself by synthesis of the protein. By synthesis of the protein. That's why this allele is called a recessive allele, which cannot easily express in the presence of the dominant allele. And you can see here, this is also the chromosome. In this chromosome, I will zoom the diagram so that you can easily understand the dominant allele, the concept of dominant allele and the recessive allele. You can see here these D are the capital D, right? This in the form of homozygous. Homozygous means both alleles are identical. They may be a dominant, they may be a recessive. If the both alleles are in the form of a capital, that it means these are the homozygous dominant. What I'm saying? Homozygous dominant. This is the homozygous dominant, right? Why did these are the homozygous? Because they both alleles are identically mean both allele are same. Both allele are bearing the same characteristic. While that why these are called a dominant, because it can be expressed their trait. There is no any mutations behind their genes. That's why these are called the homozygous dominants. The allele you can see here, this is also the another pair of the gene which is known as the alleles. These capital A and the small d, these are the heterozygous. I have already made the video on the in this lecture, heterozygous and homozygous. These allele, despite have the different allele, the capital D can express their trait. It can suppress the trait of small d. That's why this called the heterozygous dominant, right? This is why this is called the heterozygous, because both alleles are different. And why this is called the heterozygous dominant means they can express itself. The d have capacity to express itself and suppress the characteristic of another allele. That is why this allele is called heterozygous dominant. And if I show the practical applications in the human being, the eye color of the human being, you can see here the B, capital B means it show the brown eyes. The color of eyes is brown. The capital B and small b also show the brown eyes. Why? Because the capital B can express